Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. Amber Lyda here. I am a psychologist. I teach therapists how to have better lives by building businesses online. Today, we're going to talk about building an online therapy practice online. And one of the students in my course, Step by Step, submitted this question. She was going through the risk management section of the course, and she says, when you mention looking up the nearest receiving facilities for a client or finding out the regional process for emergency intervention, do you have any tips on how best to find this information? Great question. So, in the step by step course, I talk a lot about the importance of figuring out your emergency response plan before the emergency happens. And included are all of the forms that I've created for folks to be able to assess risk, even when their adrenaline is high, to be able to document that risk and resiliency in their records, and to make wise and informed decisions about how best to support their client when a crisis happens. And one of those things that we have to think about is how will we get the client to the help that they need? If you are working in a physical practice, you are going to know the area around you. If you've been there for a hot minute, right? You're going to know, like, oh, this hospital's good, this one not so much. This psychiatrist who does residency at this place is fantastic. Like, if I can get them connected, these are not things that we always know in an online practice where our clients may be 3 counties over or even 10 states over. So it's important to do a little legwork beforehand for each and every one of your clients. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that would look and also about how we can address this question submitted by one of our step-by-step students. Our students get to submit questions and then I do videos for them answering them. And I thought this was like a really good one. So I want to share some of the answers with you as well. Okay. You see me looking around because I am new to using this particular software and I'm looking for a pause button, but I don't see one. So we're just going to keep going. So as soon as a client comes into your practice, you're going to have them do the informed consent. And of course, you're going to go over where the limits to confidentiality are for any sort of therapeutic practice and where the additional issues might be protecting their confidentiality and privacy in a telehealth practice. And if you're interested in what that can look like, I do have an outline available for free of my informed consent. And if you just want to purchase the informed consent, it's only $100. So you can do that on my website, or just use the free outline and build your own. So we go over that in the informed consent. Something that I include in mine is if they're living with other people and those folks may be home when we're doing therapy sessions, I'd really like it if they gave me those contact names and numbers. I've had clients who have gone into a medical emergency, and while it's great for me to call 911, let's say the client falls over, hits their head, has a seizure. Wouldn't it be fantastic if you knew that their mom or sister or roommate was home and you were able to call them as well to go in and immediately assess the client? So I ask those kinds of questions and add that into my informed consent. Then once they're okay, we're definitely gonna work together. I want to find out normal assessment of risk. We can talk more about that if that would be helpful for you. But also, like, all right, so what's the situation if they do need to go into a hospital voluntarily or not? And how can I facilitate that with the most ease for the client should that situation come up? And this particular student is asking about my tip to look up the nearest receiving facility or the process of whatever the community is that they're in. And here's why that's important. You will find in some communities that the process is to call the police and have the police go over and do an assessment and transport that person to a hospital. And you might think, cool, I don't have to think about it anymore. But I do want you to think about your client. There are some communities that have a mobile crisis response unit, and these are mental health clinicians who go out and assess the client at either that client's house or a convenient, safe in between place. And they're going to have a lot more training in being able to assess and to do so compassionately than police who have like 50,000 other duties, right? So if I have the option between those two, I want to pick the one that's better for my client. I'm going to choose to use a mobile crisis response team as opposed to extra burdens on the police, but also probably less trained in doing the kind of assessment we're looking to do. So you can just Google this information. I wish that there was a one-stop shop to try to find this info, but what I typically will do is I will look by city or county of my client to figure out what is the crisis response plan. And you can Google things like suicidality or suicide prevention in an area. What is often super helpful is if you get in touch with the community mental health care facility in the region, and they will almost always have these answers. Or if there's a university counseling center in that area, they will always have these answers as well. So you don't have to find it in a Google search. You could Google for the people who will have the insider scoop and ask them, which is also, P.S., a really great way to start networking. So the other piece of this, I want to find out what's the process to get them into the hospital and what's the most compassionate and easeful process available to this client in this particular area. Maybe it's the police, maybe it's a mobile crisis unit, maybe it's that I have to fill out paperwork and then I have to call the hospital and then I also have to arrange for transportation for the client. And, we need to know ahead of time. It's not fun to figure that out in the moment. But then I also want to know if there's like 6 hospitals in the area, it's often helpful to get them to a hospital designated as a receiving facility. Now, that's what it's called in my area. If you know of it being called something else in yours, please put that in the comments to help other people. But basically, what it means is that hospital can do the blood work or whatever necessary to medically clear the person and then scooch them straight into the crisis stabilization unit. As opposed to, here's the hospital, now we've got to transport again to another place, or perhaps even to a second additional place to get them into a hospital. So, if it's possible that there is a hospital attached to a crisis stabilization unit, I would love to do that. A lot of times you can't have the person go directly to a crisis stabilization unit because they have to get medically cleared first. Sometimes you can. This is just good stuff to figure out ahead of time. Because if you've ever, you might be thinking like, that seems like a lot of work. Listen, if you have ever had to assist someone with being hospitalized, it is such an unpleasant experience for that client to be in crisis and also have to figure out for themselves, where do I need to go? Who do I need to talk to? What's going to happen to me? I would much rather know, or at least be as informed as I can about that information, and assist them to make this already difficult process as easeful as I can. And let me tell you, there are times when you're moving through the process of a crisis stabilization procedure where your client may be in a space of like, I'm willing to go voluntarily. I know this is what I need. Let's do this thing. If that process is taking 4, 6, 8, 12 hours, that mindset can shift, even though the need is still really there. They just get tired and hungry, and it's an annoying process if it's going to take a really, really long time. So, if you can assist in facilitating so that they get to the right place the first time and they get into the unit while they're still in the headspace to be able to go voluntarily, or even if it's an involuntary hospitalization, just to make the dang process smoother, you're doing a kindness and a service for your client, and you're also covering your own bouquet. Okay, so the last piece that I want to add there is, for those of you who are legally permitted to begin the paperwork to get somebody into a hospital, you carry some liability, and you want to make sure that you're adequately communicating the level of risk that you see to the receiving facility, the crisis stabilization unit. Because what your client may feel comfortable sharing with you, they may feel less comfortable sharing with the person who's assessing them, the second assessor at the crisis stabilization unit. So, what can be very unpleasant is, this person's at risk. You do all the things, you get them to the crisis stabilization unit, they talk with somebody new, they're less comfortable with that person, or maybe they're having second thoughts about this whole darn thing, and they present differently. And so that person's like, I don't think you meet criteria. And they send them back home, right? That's not a good feeling to go to sleep with. So it's really important that in your paperwork, you are seeking consent to, well, you don't actually have to seek consent legally because you have it already. If they're in crisis and you are facilitating their safety, you're able to talk to the place that they're going and let them know, like, hey, here's what I'm hearing, here's what I'm concerned about. But it's also really smart to get it documented and on paper. So I will fax that stuff right over. Okie dokie, y'all. I hope that that's helpful. Again, the tip that I would have with how to figure out who these folks are, I would get in touch with the CMHC in the region, the community mental health care facility, or call a couple of the crisis stabilization units in that area and find out what the process is for that area and where they recommend that you take or have your client transported to, which hospitals they prefer and which hospitals they would suggest you don't go to. All right, friends, I hope that was helpful, and I hope that you have a lovely day. If you need help getting your own therapy practice started online, you can check out my program step by step. I have the website listed below. You can learn all about it and decide if that's something that you need and would be supportive to you. Take good care.